We are at the Robin Theater with Grace Carras. She is the co-host for the Poetry Room Open Mic. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
This is a super cool, eclectic space. I love poetry, so I couldn't be happier than to do an interview with you. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what your role is with the Poetry Room.
Sure thing, and thank you, by the way. I'm thrilled to be here. Basically, I'm a 22-year-old spoken word poet, student at Michigan State, and I just kind of help organize, run, keep things moving smoothly during the open mic and advertising via social media and that sort of thing.
Okay. And so how did you get involved with the Poetry Room?
I met Masaki at a performance of mine. I was on a competitive spoken word slam poetry team for a competition called Cupsy. And our team opened for this poet named Neil Hilborn.
Okay.
And Masaki happened to be at that show, and we sort of spoke after the performance. And I don't know, he kind of brought me into the world a little bit, this world.
Tell us a little bit about what the spoken word is, what that is.
It's, the basic thing is that it's poetry that's meant to be heard and not necessarily seen on a page. The physical form of it, like the structure, the way that it would look written down, kind of takes a back seat to presentation and inflection and pausing, and it's kind of a little bit where theater and literature meet, almost.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated. I don't actually listen to audiobooks, but I've been because I like to have my own voice when I read a book, and I like to make up my own characters. But I've always been fascinated by the inflection and the tone and the way in which people read stories, or even when you see someone go to a classroom with elementary children and they're reading a story, and just the passion that they have inwardly to bring out the story through how they're saying it to the children to captivate them and to capture them.
Absolutely. It's a really important skill, and I didn't realize when I started doing this that it is actually separate from writing. I was not a storyteller by any means when I started doing spoken word poetry. It's sort of a thing that you have to build separately. It's almost like a different muscle in a way.
Is it? Do you help bring talent to the Poetry Room too?
In every way that I can. I reach out a lot to students on campus because that's where I spend most of my time being a student as well. And just trying to bring in sort of new young people. There's a bit of an issue with students, living and residing in East Lansing, but not making that hop over to Lansing. So what I've been trying to encourage is, for my classmates and peers to make that jump a little bit. There's this ongoing joke about the 127 line, that highway bridge that separates those two areas.
Oh yeah.
We need more students to cross that, I think.
How do you encourage people to cross that line from poetry they've written and shoved in a diary or in a notebook or in a drawer to actually bring that out and get up on stage?
That's a good question. Usually there's hesitation, but it doesn't take too much convincing because that desire is already there. That sort of yearning to feel heard. And
that's why they wrote the poem in the first place.
Exactly. And maybe when you're younger, or at least this has been my experience, there's sort of that urge to bury overpowers that urge to share, but you can't hold it inside forever. And if you're still writing when you're turning 20, 30, 40, it's got to come out somehow. And so we just try to provide the most welcoming space to do that, I guess. We get a lot of first-time readers here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I'm not particularly, I'm sorry, a religious person, but that moment of seeing a first-time reader share something in a new space among new people for the very first time ever is like the closest thing to holy that I can imagine. There's that voice shaking and like they're clenching their paper, but that look of pride and relief as they get off stage is like the most rewarding thing in the world to see.
And you've been doing poetry for how long?
Oh, I've been doing poetry since about, I was 11 or 12 when I started, mostly.
All right.
Yeah.
But you haven't always been reading poetry?
No, that started when I turned about 15 years old. I'm from a smaller town, Midland, which is very sciencey. And there was really not much of a poetry scene. There were poets, but there was no space for poets to present. So, I mean, when I started doing it and started feeling that desire to share and be heard, because I was a very quiet person throughout middle school and high school, but that urge kind of crept up. The only spoken word events that were going to happen were the ones that I was going to put on myself. So that's what I did, and it gave some good experience and insight into how these things work and how open mics flow. And I think that experience has helped me here, even though, you know, Lansing is a much larger city. Half the work is already done. The community is already thriving. It's all out there. It's just a matter of amplifying it to the people who haven't maybe seen yet.
Well, thank you so much, Grace. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. Thank you so much.
And if you're interested at all in participating in DearMichiganState.com, an upcoming event on September 11th, I know you're on Facebook. The event is on Facebook, and so people can search for it there and reach out to you.
That's right. If you comment on, you know, any of our posts saying, "Hey, I'd like to sign up," our sign-ups open usually about a week before the actual event itself. We have 20 slots open for online sign-ups and reserve a few at the door as well.
Great.
But get here early because our doors are at 7:30 technically, but people are already showing up to sign up at 7. So
thank you so much.
Thank you.